A peaceful suburban family, tucked away in the leafy suburbs of Ohio, the Parker family had always seemed like the perfect snapshot of the American dream. Their two-story colonial home, framed by a neatly trimmed white picket fence, sat on a quiet, tree-lined street where neighbors exchanged friendly waves and children rode their bikes until dusk. On weekends, the scent of freshly mowed grass mingled with the laughter of Sarah's two children as they raced barefoot across the backyard, their sneakers discarded in the morning sunshine. Sarah, 35, had once dreamed of a high-powered career in graphic design, but after the birth of her first child, she made the conscious decision to become a full-time homemaker. To Sarah, creating a warm, nurturing home was a vocation as worthy as any profession. Her days were filled with school drop-offs, baking blueberry muffins for PTA meetings, and tending to the rose bushes that lined the front porch. Mark, her husband, worked at a local financial firm, often leaving for the office before sunrise, but he returned each evening in time for family dinners. Together, they shared a quiet companionship, exchanging stories over homemade casseroles and clinking glasses of sweet iced tea as the sunset bathed their backyard in soft gold. Life in the suburbs followed a gentle, predictable rhythm. Saturdays meant soccer games, pancake breakfasts, and impromptu barbecues with neighbors. The Parkers decorated their home for every holiday, painting pumpkins for Halloween and stringing dazzling lights across the roof each winter. Sarah, ever the meticulous planner, kept family traditions alive with photo albums, handwritten notes, and birthday banners carefully stowed away for each special occasion. Within these routines, Sarah found genuine contentment. She cherished bedtime stories with her kids, long evening walks along the neighborhood lake, and the occasional get-together with her closest friends who lived only a few blocks away. Her sense of fulfillment came not from grand gestures, but from the small, everyday moments that knit her family together. For Sarah, prioritizing her family came naturally. She wore her role as wife and mother with pride, her sacrifices unnoticed by most, but meaningful in the quiet tapestry of their suburban life. To an outsider, the Parker family appeared picture-perfect, a testament to the quiet strength of love, stability, and a dream built on a foundation of trust. Subtle changes in the thoughtful husband. As autumn's golden light filtered through the trees lining Maple Drive, Sarah began to sense a shift in her husband. It was subtle at first, small things that could easily go unnoticed by anyone else. Mark had always been the quintessential family man, attentive, responsible, quick to help with homework or grill burgers on Sundays. He'd never missed an anniversary, always showed up at school recitals with flowers, and remembered how Sarah liked her coffee. 2 sugars, a dash of cream. But in recent weeks, his routines began to fray at the edges. Normally meticulous, Mark now stumbled in late, blaming traffic or extra work from his firm's latest big account. He looked distracted at dinner, sometimes staring into his plate as the kids relayed their school adventures. His laughter, once full and contagious, had become rare and hollow, more a habit than a feeling. He started carrying his phone everywhere, even placing it face down during family meals, something he'd never done before. The device was now locked with a passcode, a curious detail, but Sarah brushed it off at first, chalking it up to work privacy. Yet small moments kept piling up. A hushed phone call answered in the garage, whispers trailing off as she entered the room, or abrupt changes in his schedule with little explanation. He would shower in the evenings, claiming it helped him relax, but lingered in the bathroom longer than usual. Sometimes Sarah caught him gazing out the window, lost in thought, returning only when she spoke his name twice. At one point, Mark forgot their traditional Friday night movie, something that hadn't happened in a decade of marriage. "Sorry, honey, it slipped my mind. Tough day," he mumbled, heading upstairs before Sarah or the kids could press further. That night, as she loaded the dishwasher alone, Sarah's unease grew. Was it stress, exhaustion, or something deeper? Friends brushed off her worries. "It's just the busy season," they reassured her over pumpkin spice lattes at the neighborhood cafe. But as the days grew shorter and the air turned crisp, Sarah's intuition, a quiet but constant companion, whispered that her world was shifting in ways she couldn't quite name. Each night, she replayed these moments in her mind, searching for a logical explanation, yearning for reassurance that all was well. Yet the growing distance in Mark's eyes told a different story. And in her heart, Sarah couldn't escape the feeling that a storm was quietly gathering just beyond their perfect suburban facade. The shock from a trusted friend. Sarah always believed the foundation of her life, her family, her friendships, was sturdy, unshakable. Among those friends, Lisa had been her confidant for over a decade. They'd met sophomore year at Ohio State, two young women navigating the chaos of dorm life, late-night study sessions, and the excitement of discovering independence far from home. Their friendship matured along with them, from carefree off-campus parties to wedding dress fittings, baby showers, and the cozy, familiar laughter they shared over mugs of chamomile tea in each other's kitchens. Lisa had attended every birthday for Sarah's kids, sent flowers when Sarah's father passed, and been the bridesmaid who steadied Sarah's shaking hands when she walked down the aisle toward Mark. To Sarah, Lisa was the sister she never had. One quiet October evening, with the kids upstairs finishing homework and Mark fiddling with something out in the garage, Sarah curled up in the living room. The air inside hummed with the scent of cinnamon and apples, a candle reminder of autumn's past. She pulled out her grocery list, then remembered a school email she needed to reply to, and reached for Mark's tablet, which he'd left charging on the side table. Mark usually used his tablet just for reading news and occasional late-night work reports, and Sarah had borrowed it before without a second thought. But as she picked it up, she noticed a flurry of notifications. 3 missed messages from a contact labeled simply L, and several emails flagged as urgent. Sarah frowned. Lisa's texts sometimes popped up on family group chats, mostly exchanging recipes or planning surprise parties, but rarely on Mark's private devices. Something felt off, but she quickly told herself not to jump to conclusions. Still, curiosity overpowered hesitation. She tapped in the familiar passcode. They'd never hidden passwords before, and opened Mark's messages. At first, the conversation looked ordinary.
Decryption complete.
Quick exchanges about a school fundraiser, a joke about a neighbor's Halloween decorations. But as Sarah scrolled back through the weeks, the tone shifted. Messages grew more frequent, more personal. Late-night texts about missing our talks and can't wait to see you tomorrow. There were private jokes she didn't understand, references to places only Mark and Lisa would be together, right in her own town. Mixed in were brief, hurried emails with subject lines like, "Tonight?" and "Same place." Sarah felt her skin prickle. Her hand trembled as she continued. Then she saw them. Photos, grainy but unmistakable. Mark's car parked at the far end of a local park. Lisa's reflection in the passenger mirror. An audio message, accidentally saved, of Mark's laugh, so familiar and yet delivered in a way reserved for someone else. A wave of nausea hit. She scrolled faster, not sure what she was looking for, maybe proof that this was some elaborate, cruel misunderstanding. But each new piece, the "I needed that" after a supposed late work night, the "I can't keep seeing you like this, we have to be careful," felt like another brick pressed to her chest. It was betrayal, clear as day, painstakingly documented in the glow of the tablet. Not only from Mark, who had once made grand promises about honesty and respect, but from Lisa, the one person outside her own family Sarah had trusted most. She remembered the countless times she'd praised Mark's loyalty to Lisa, how Lisa had squeezed her hand and whispered, "You're so lucky, Sarah." She thought of the play dates Lisa had arranged with Sarah's kids, the hours they'd spent side by side at the PTA bake sale, and the whispery, late-night phone calls when Lisa had needed advice about her own relationships. All the while, that line between friend and betrayer had already been crossed. Sarah's vision blurred as she scrolled. She paused at one message sent the previous Friday, the very night Mark had claimed he'd been stuck at work, the night Sarah had eaten pizza on the couch with the kids and waited for Mark's return. The message read, "Tonight was perfect. I wish things could be different, even just for one weekend." Lisa had responded with a string of heart emojis. A cold numbness crept in, unfamiliar and disorienting. For a few moments, the world seemed to shrink to the four corners of that screen. Every detail spelling out a reality Sarah never imagined she would face. Her heart pounded in her chest, louder than the sounds of laughter drifting down the stairs from her children's bedroom. The initial urge was to scream, throw the tablet, confront Mark instantly, call Lisa, and demand the truth. But years of being the family's emotional anchor, steady, composed, always thinking things through, held her back. She placed the tablet gently on the side table, hands shaking, and stared blankly at the autumn decorations on her mantelpiece. 1,000 memories rolled over her in waves. Thanksgiving dinners, where Mark carved the turkey, Lisa laughing at his corny jokes, the night Sarah had confided in Lisa about her postpartum loneliness, the way Mark and Lisa had always joked with each other, but never, Sarah thought, at her expense. The innocence she'd wrapped around her closest bonds felt paper-thin now, as if one wrong move might shred what remained of her sense of home. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She waited until the house was silent, then locked herself in the downstairs bathroom, scrolling through every message, screenshotting each damning detail. At 2 a.m., she typed her own notes in a password-protected file. Timestamps, locations, context, trying to make sense of the pattern. Her hands worked methodically, but her heart alternated between breakneck fear and hollow exhaustion. She realized she didn't cry. Maybe the shock was too great. Maybe her mind was racing too far ahead, considering the children, their routines, the home and family veneer she always kept shining for their sake. But beneath the numbness, a heavy, cold anger simmered. Not the rage of wounded pride, but the fury of a person betrayed by two of the most important people in her world. There would be no impulsive show of emotion, she decided. This story would not end in a cliché scene of glass-shattering drama. When dawn broke, Sarah was still awake, face pale and tired as she fixed breakfast for her children as usual, greeting Mark with a careful smile when he came in from his morning run. The betrayal lingered behind her eyes, invisible to anyone who couldn't see the storm inside her. As she watched her husband kiss the kids goodbye and her phone pinged with another group chat meme from Lisa, Sarah made herself a silent promise. She would not be anyone's victim. What Mark and Lisa didn't know, what they would never expect, was just how strong Sarah could be when the people she loved most had let her down. And thus, The wheels in Sarah's mind began to turn. She would gather every piece of truth. She would reclaim her sense of self. And when the moment was right, she would be ready, not just for answers, but for her own reckoning. The silent plan to gather evidence. For Sarah, the hours and days that followed the discovery felt surreal, as if she were moving through a dream where every detail had become sharpened and suspect. Gone was the carefree routine of suburban life. In its place was a constant, thrumming awareness, an exhausting vigilance that settled over her shoulders like a heavy winter coat. But if Sarah was heartbroken, she was also resolute. After that sleepless night alone with Mark's tablet, she made a silent vow to herself, not to react impulsively, not to let anguish dictate her next steps. She would be methodical, precise, and above all, unnoticeable. Sarah's nature was one of measured patience. Years as a homemaker had quietly honed a remarkable attention to detail, tracking school events, managing household expenses, even knowing, without looking, when the sugar tin would run out. Now, she would redirect those skills to a secret mission, to uncover the truth as thoroughly as possible, all while hiding in plain sight. She started simply, committing to memory every oddity, every unexplained absence or hurried phone call. She bought a small, spiral-bound notebook at the grocery store, ostensibly for jotting down recipes, and tucked it into a kitchen drawer with the pens and grocery lists. Into this innocuous book, she began logging dates and times, when Mark left for meetings that weren't on his shared work calendar, when he took phone calls in the garage, the nights he came home wearing a faint perfume that wasn't hers. Sarah was careful not to let suspicion taint her manner at home. If anything, she became more attentive, more present with the kids, more considerate to Mark. On the surface, she kept up every tradition: weekend pancakes, bedtime stories, even the inside jokes that had been worn thin by years of marriage. Mark never noticed the small changes. Her glances to his phone, her habit of picking up after him in the evenings, just a little longer, just long enough to see if he'd left an open laptop or a message notification. At first, it was passive observation, but Sarah knew she'd need evidence, irrefutable, concrete. Her next step was quietly technical. Late at night, while Mark slept, she taught herself how to back up data from their shared devices. YouTube tutorials, watched with the volume barely above a whisper, became her allies. She learned how to retrieve deleted texts and save cloud-stored photos. It felt more like conducting a high-stakes science experiment than invading her husband's privacy. Every document she preserved, every screenshot she captured, was labeled, organized, and copied onto a password-protected flash drive, hidden in a cookie tin at the back of the pantry. The real risk, Sarah knew, lay in being found out before she was ready. Gathering the evidence required her to fake a calm that ran entirely counter to the storm inside her. One evening, as Mark showered, she hurriedly printed copies of flagged emails and text conversations from Lisa, making sure to wipe all traces from the family printer's queue. Each printout was placed in a folder marked Recipes and tucked among years of random paperwork in a corner cabinet. She kept her phone close, rolling her eyes and joking about the PTA group chat anytime Mark glanced over during her late-night documentation sessions. Paranoia was her shadow. She changed up her methods, alternating between digital and physical storage, using the kids' old iPod to record voice memos about things she couldn't capture on paper. Every whisper between Mark and Lisa at community events, or even the familiar easy laughter that once meant nothing, took on sinister new meanings. When Lisa came by for coffee, Sarah would smile, pour an extra cup, and ask probing, gentle questions. The casual, "How have you been? You seem busy lately," was met by Lisa's careful shrugs and smooth deflections. Sarah layered every conversation into her mental vault, sometimes excusing herself to jot things down in the bathroom. She became a careful observer of patterns, of behavior, of language, of lies. Mark's excuses, once plausible, began to contradict each other. "Didn't you say you were at the office last Wednesday?" she'd ask, folding laundry, watching his eyes dart. "Or was it the client dinner?"
We have a deal.
He would fumble, then recover, and Sarah would add another note to her growing record. Sometimes exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her resolve. She worried about what all this duplicity was doing to her soul. Living two lives, performing normalcy, while her mind spun with logistics and timelines, trying to avoid both discovery and the kind of coldness that would spark suspicion. Late at night, after everyone had gone to bed, she allowed herself to cry quietly in the bathroom or stare unblinking at the ceiling in the dark. But when the dawn broke, she resumed her silent campaign with a steadiness that even she was surprised to find. There were close calls. Once, Mark nearly caught her on his laptop, claiming he'd left a file for her about their insurance renewal. Sarah's heart pounded as she shut down the email program just in time, forcing a laugh about not knowing where anything was on these things. Another time, Lisa arrived unexpectedly in the afternoon, dropping off cupcakes. Sarah felt the weight of the flash drive in her pocket. She'd been about to update it and had to tuck it quickly under a stack of art projects as Lisa chatted breezily about the next school fundraiser. The worst moments came when Sarah began to doubt herself. Was she really on the right track? Or had paranoia gotten the better of her? She reread Mark's messages and Lisa's replies, second-guessed the emotional subtext of each phrase, wondered if the betrayal in her mind was as obvious to the outside world as it felt to her. Each time those doubts surfaced, she forced herself to return to the evidence, to the mounting pile of screenshots, emails, call logs, and photographs that told, again and again, the same devastating story. Through it all, Sarah's perspective began to shift. At first, her investigation was about survival, about bracing herself, finding out the truth so she wouldn't be blindsided a second time. Gradually, it became something more empowering. With each new piece of proof, she regained a sense of agency, reclaiming fragments of control in a life that had once felt entirely predictable. She realized, too, that she no longer needed to prove anything to herself. The evidence wasn't just a weapon against Mark and Lisa, but also a lifeline to her own sense of self-worth. She planned for contingencies. She began researching family law in Ohio, reading articles on divorce, custody arrangements, and the division of assets. She talked in hypotheticals online, posting anonymously on support forums and gathering testimonies from others who had survived similar betrayals. All the while, she presented the face of a devoted wife and mother, attending school plays, volunteering at the library, passing out cookies at church bake sales, her public mask seamless and reassuring. As the months passed, the evidence grew into an archive, a painful but necessary body of proof that no one in her world suspected. She knew she couldn't live in this limbo forever, but the timing of the reveal, of her moment to act, would be entirely on her terms. She imagined it sometimes, in the dark, a confrontation not born of rage, but of quiet, righteous certainty. In her private journal, she wrote, "I will not be the victim of this story. When the time comes, he and she will have nothing left to hide behind, but the truth I quietly collected. Sarah moved through her days with unwavering patience. Each morning, she dressed the children, hugged them tightly, kissed her husband with measured distance. Every gesture was a piece of theater and, at the same time, an act of loyalty to the family she was determined to protect, even as she prepared for the possibility that it would never be the same. Through her silent diligence, Sarah not only preserved the truth, she preserved herself. And by the time she would need her archive, she would stand ready, head high, not broken, but transformed by her resolve. The truth unveiled at the family party the day of the Parkers' 15th wedding anniversary dawned with a gentle promise of celebration. Sarah woke early, as she always did, but this morning carried a quiet tension below the surface. The house was awash with golden light, the kitchen filled with the scent of rising dough for fresh rolls and the low hum of Sarah's playlist. Songs to make memories to.
Here you go.
Balloons,
Thank you.
knotted to chair backs bobbed in the soft autumn breeze, coming in through an open window, and family photos lined the mantel. Mark and Sarah, arms linked at their wedding. The kids, gap-toothed and grinning. Lisa, there she was in more than one frame, smiling, always close. By midday, the house had transformed. Sarah, in a simple blue dress, guided the choreography of a family gathering like a practiced maestro, double-checking the lasagna, setting out extra folding chairs, directing her father-in-law, while his hands tried and failed to tie a stubborn ribbon. The kids darted through the rooms, trailing laughter and the telltale giddiness that only cake and cousins can bring. Guests trickled in, arms laden with gifts, stories, and casseroles, the air filled with the familiar chorus of family. Uncle Howard's bad jokes, Aunt Gail's singing, her mother's gentle ribbing about Sarah, still not using her fancy tablecloth. Mark, always the charming host on these occasions, flitted through the rooms with effortless polish. He greeted his mother with a peck on the cheek, topped off everyone's sweet tea, and wore the easy smile of a man surrounded by the people who knew him best, or thought they did. Lisa arrived a little later than usual,
Yes, that's it.
blaming traffic and hugging Sarah a second too long. She looked as polished as ever, hair perfectly styled, eyes bright, and carrying her signature macaroni and cheese in a dish covered with a red checkered cloth. Only Sarah noticed how Lisa's hands shook ever so slightly as she set the dish down. Just a delicate tremble, barely perceptible to anyone else. They exchanged pleasantries, air kisses, and for a moment, it might have been any party in any year. The best friends, shoulder to shoulder, laughter on their lips. But inside, Sarah moved like the conductor at the center of a hidden symphony, 1,000 thoughts crossing under her calm smile. Every moment of rehearsal, the weeks of watching, collecting evidence, pretending nothing had changed, brought her, inexorably, to this moment. When everyone had gathered, once dessert was done, and the lights had dimmed for Mark's favorite anniversary brandy, Sarah called the family to the living room. "I have a little surprise," she announced, holding up Mark's tablet with a gentle smile. A slideshow to celebrate 15 years of memories with all of you. The crowd responded with cheers and clinking glasses. Mark slid his arm around her back, lips finding her ear. "You, always thinking ahead," he whispered, that practiced warmth in his voice. Lisa, sitting with Sarah's mother near the sofa, crossed her legs, her face open, trusting, a little tired. Sarah's heart thudded in her chest, but her hands were steady. She connected the tablet to the big screen TV, the same one the children used for movie nights, and navigated to the folder marked Anniversary. She had considered every detail,
Be careful
rehearsed
out there.
every click,
Some things are
every
not what they
word.
seem.
The slideshow began innocently enough. Photos from early days, the first tiny apartment, their wedding, baby pictures. Everyone laughed, cooed, relived the moments. The warmth in the room was real, but for Sarah, it was edged with coming thunder. Then the photos changed. Sarah's voice, a gentle narration meant to thank everyone for their love and support, faded. The photos transitioned to screenshots. First, group chats and shared holidays with friends. Then, slowly, damning texts. Mark's words to Lisa, Lisa's replies, time-stamped messages, unmistakable in their intimacy. Last night was amazing. I wish we had more time alone. Photos of the two together at the park, Mark's distinctive car, Lisa's reflection in a window. Screenshots rolled by, one after another. Laughter faded. There was confusion, then silence. Mark's arm stiffened around Sarah's shoulder. Lisa's hand, busy fiddling with a napkin, went limp in her lap. The others, mother, father-in-law, nieces, nephews, stared at the screen, unable to look away. A low, stunned hush settled over the room, broken only by the quiet whir of the projector fan. At the center of the unraveling vision was Sarah, standing tall, chin lifted. Her voice, quiet but unwavering, broke the silence. For 15 years, I believed our family was built on honesty and love. Some things, it seems, were only true on the surface. I'm sorry you all have to see this, but I will not be part of lies any longer. Mark tried to stand, his face a mix of anger, desperation, and disbelief, but the words caught in his throat. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, whether from guilt, fear, or humiliation. Sarah couldn't tell. The children, sensing the gravity, crept quietly to Sarah's side. Her youngest took her hand. Aunt Gail was first to speak. Sarah, honey, is this real? Sarah nodded, voice shaky but resolute. I did not want to believe it myself. I hoped I'd made a mistake. But this is the truth. Accusations tumbled out of the silence. Mark blustered, at first denying, then trying to explain. Lisa wept, face hidden in her hands. Extended family murmured, confused and appalled. They had shared holidays, birthdays, life's triumphs and sorrows, with Mark and Lisa side by side. But no one, not a single person, could erase what had just flashed across the screen. Sarah stood at the center, battered, but unbending. She didn't cry, not then. Too many sleepless nights had trained her heart for this moment. Her hands rested softly on her children's shoulders. She met Mark's desperate gaze with steady eyes. There would be no more secrets in this house, no more pretending. Gradually, the party dissolved, guests shuffling away in uneasy clusters. A wave of awkward whispers and sidelong glances. No one wanted to be the last to leave. Lisa left without a word, only a quick, broken, "I'm sorry," before disappearing down the driveway. Mark stayed, pleading quietly in the kitchen, but Sarah shut the door behind her and gathered her children close. That night, the house felt big and cold, emptied of illusions. Sarah tucked her children in, answered their questions in whispers, then sat in the living room for a long time alone. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would look like, but the truth, her truth, had finally shattered the false peace of that perfect suburban life. And for the first time in months, even as her heart ached, Sarah breathed in the cool night air and felt something close to relief. She had taken control of her story. The next chapter, for the first time in 15 years, would be hers to write, rising after the break. The house was quieter now. Gone were the cheerful, overlapping voices that once filled every room. The easy banter at the dinner table, the giggles echoing up and down the stairs, the warm hum of routine that used to wrap around Sarah each morning. In the aftermath of the truth's reckoning, silence settled into every space, sometimes heavy, sometimes oddly peaceful. The kids tiptoed through their days, still playful but newly sensitive to the shifting energy in their home. Mark moved out a week after the disastrous anniversary, packing his belongings in stiff, awkward trips that Sarah quietly observed from her bedroom window. Expression unreadable. It would have been easy, perhaps even natural, for Sarah to retreat into grief. She had every reason to let her heartbreak become her identity. 15 years of marriage dismantled in front of both kin and strangers. The disintegration of trust, not only between husband and wife, but between best friends. Sleepless nights stacked like dominoes. And yet, as she moved through these first, unsteady weeks, Sarah discovered something unexpected, flickering beneath the sorrow. A stubborn current of strength, as if some inner foundation was still holding, even as the walls around her life crumbled. At first, small victories were all she could manage. She forced herself to maintain the familiar rituals for her children, making their favorite lunches for school, reading bedtime stories on the couch, volunteering, despite the whispers, at the PTA. Each act felt heavier than before, her motions thick with invisible resistance, but she moved through them anyway. There was comfort in consistency, and the rituals became threads that stitched the three of them together as they built a new version of family, no longer defined by what or who was missing. But grief, Sarah realized, doesn't follow a tidy schedule. It ebbed and surged unpredictably. Some mornings she felt buoyed by clarity and resolve, as if sunlight itself had threaded through her chest, illuminating new possibilities. Other days arrived cloaked in exhaustion and doubt. She would find herself wandering from room to room, distracted by memories embedded in the wallpaper and the carpet, haunted by the echo of Lisa's laughter or Mark's voice calling from the other end of the hall. Crying, when it came, was private and purifying, usually late at night, alone beneath the pale glow of a reading lamp, with the rest of the world asleep and peaceful. Still, Sarah refused to let her pain rot into bitterness. When Mark called to talk logistics, child drop-offs, weekend schedules, car payments, she kept her tone civil, firm, but never cruel. She told herself, again and again, that dignity mattered. As the divorce marched forward, paperwork building up alongside the emotional debris, she began meeting weekly with a counselor. Therapy became her life raft, a rare, judgment-free space to pour out confusion and anger, to ask questions with no easy answers, to process the betrayal and the bruised sense of self it left behind. It was during one of these sessions that her counselor asked, gently but directly, "What piece of yourself did you lose in all this, and how can you begin to reclaim it?" Sarah thought about the answer for days afterward. She remembered, suddenly and vividly, the bright excitement she'd once felt for design, a passion pushed aside when babies arrived, and the needs of others eclipsed her own. As a student, she dreamed of working in a creative field, picturing herself in a sunlit city office with mood boards lining the walls and colors exploding onto digital canvases late into the night. Those dreams hadn't faded. They'd simply gone dormant, packed away beneath carpools and bake sales, waiting for their turn. One evening, after the kids had fallen asleep, Sarah dusted off her rusty laptop and began searching for online courses in graphic design. Her hands trembled as she clicked through options: typography, motion graphics, digital illustration. It was daunting. Technology had evolved, and the design world was unrecognizable in places. But she felt something kindling deep inside her. She enrolled in a beginner's course, then another. In the weeks that followed, long after homework was finished and the dishes were done, she sketched and edited, her imagination coming back to life. Pixel by pixel, the kids noticed. "Mom, did you draw that?" her daughter asked one morning, eyes wide at the vibrant poster Sarah had mock designed for a made-up brand.
This grants you access.
"That's so cool." Their approval became fuel. Sarah shared finished projects with her sister and her oldest college friend. Small circles at first, but encouragement radiated outward. For the first time in years, she felt seen for something beyond her roles as wife or mother. She was Sarah again, curious, inventive, and quietly ambitious. Weeks turned into months, and each day brought evidence that she was changing, not just surviving, but growing. Her wardrobe changed, fewer pastels, more self-assured blues, and deep, determined greens. She took morning walks around the lake, breathing in the solitude in the crisp Ohio air. She let herself laugh, sometimes with the children, sometimes alone at a podcast, sometimes in disbelief at how far she'd come from that frozen night in her living room when her old life split open. She rebuilt friendships, carefully at first. Some neighbors drifted away, uncertain how to offer support, or embarrassed by their proximity to scandal. Other friends, ones whose quiet loyalty shone now more than ever, helped in small, meaningful ways. They babysat, sent anonymous care packages, included Sarah in impromptu pizza nights and Sunday brunches. She let herself weep with them sometimes, but more often, she just enjoyed their company. Proof that not all connection, not all trust, was doomed to collapse. Sarah's proudest moment came months later, after landing her first freelance design job. It wasn't glamorous, the pay was modest, and the client was a family-owned bakery needing a logo refresh. Still, sitting alone in the kitchen late at night, she admired the finished product, a digital illustration that captured both the bakery's warmth and her own emerging confidence. She emailed the file with trembling hands, then cried gratefully when the baker sent back an elated thank you and a photo of the new sign gleaming beneath the early spring sun. Bit by bit, her sense of self returned. The scars of betrayal remained, of course. They always would, woven deep into the fabric of her story. She accepted now that pain could be a teacher, and that survival might look different every day. But she was no longer defined by her wounds. Sarah's children, watching her persevere, also began to heal. They saw a woman not defeated, but remade by trial and courage. It wasn't the future Sarah had pictured, as a picture-perfect wife, as a friend to all, as a background presence in her own story. But it was real, and hers to shape. She knew there would be setbacks and lonely days ahead. She knew vulnerability never left completely, but every sunrise brought new opportunities for joy and self-creation. Sarah stood in the kitchen, coffee in hand, sketchbook open beside her, sunlight pouring through the window. She did not regret telling her truth or demanding better for herself and her children. The suburban dream had crumbled, but from its ashes, something far more enduring and beautiful was taking root. And with each new piece of art, each small triumph, Sarah remembered what it felt like to hope, not in spite of heartbreak, but because she'd survived it and chosen every single day to begin again. A vibrant, new chapter. 3 years had passed since that pivotal night when Sarah's carefully guarded world collapsed in her suburban living room. The transformation that followed was neither quick nor easy. It had been forged through storms, overnight tears when the kids asked for their father, long walks under rain-soaked trees, wrestling with shame and regret, and the kind of solitude that forces you to confront every shadow and memory. Yet through these trials, Sarah emerged into a life brighter and more authentic than any she'd dared to imagine 3 years earlier. After the divorce was finalized, and the emotional debris of infidelity and broken friendships had settled, Sarah made the decision to leave Ohio. The small town, once a cradle of comfort, now felt too close, too narrow, haunted by whispers and the sight of Lisa's car at the grocery store, or Mark at a PTA meeting, exchanging awkward smiles. With steady resolve, she packed up the family van, filled with her kids' comfort objects, her own precious sketchbooks and digital art tablet, and set out for New York City, a place she'd always associated with possibility. The first months in New York were dizzying. The city's rhythms, horns, sirens, laughter drifting from open-air cafes, people hustling on their own private missions, reminded Sarah of her college days, of forgotten dreams suddenly within reach. She rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria, Queens, its walls marked with the optimism of new beginnings. Gone was the white picket fence, the manicured lawn. In its place, Sarah and her children made a home with mismatched thrift store furniture and artwork taped to sunlit windows. Change wasn't instant. For herself or her kids, there were tears at bedtime, longing phone calls with friends left behind, school drop-offs where the unfamiliarity stung like a slap. But with the change came growth. Sarah took every freelance gig she could find, from designing logos for local bakeries to creating flyers for neighborhood yoga studios and running social media visuals for a friend's tech startup. Every completed project, no matter how small, was another step back into her power. Sarah's children, too, adapted. They made new friends on the playground, explored the city's parks and museums, and grew to love the sound of languages and music drifting up from the street. With her encouragement, they joined after-school art clubs and weekend soccer leagues. Instead of mourning the family they'd lost, the 3 of them began to build something new. A family defined by support, resilience, and mutual respect. As their routine stabilized, Sarah pushed herself creatively and professionally. She enrolled in night classes at a Manhattan Design Institute, learning cutting-edge software and techniques she'd missed during her years as a homemaker. The coursework was challenging, often leaving her exhausted late into the night. But it was exhilarating, too. She felt the old spark, the joy of mastery, and the hunger for improvement. Eventually, her talent and grit were noticed. A boutique technology firm specializing in user experience and branding invited her for an interview, impressed by her portfolio. An eclectic mix of cheerful bakery logos, sophisticated web layouts, and clever social media infographics. The conversation felt radically different from anything she'd experienced before. They wanted to know not only about her technical skills, but also her ability to tell stories, to empathize, to connect with people's real needs, strengths she'd honed as a mother, friend, and survivor. Sarah got the job. For the first time in years, she had a regular paycheck and a creative team to call her own. There were long brainstorming sessions over coffee, last-minute deadlines, and the thrill of seeing her designs live, shaping how strangers experienced technology. Co-workers became friends. A few even became like family, inviting her and her children to holidays when homesickness crept in. But the true vibrance of this new chapter wasn't limited to professional success. Over time, Sarah let herself hope Again, in friendship, in laughter, perhaps even in love. She wasn't in a rush. Her heart was cautious, still healing, but she no longer saw herself as broken or unworthy. The betrayals of the past hadn't defined her. They'd sharpened her understanding of honesty, boundaries, and the kind of love she deserved. Sarah reconnected with her passions. Outside of work, she began to paint again, filling canvases with vivid colors and bold shapes, often inspired by the city's ceaseless motion and her children's unfiltered joy. She took the kids to open mic poetry events and food festivals, to hidden corners of the city where people reinvented themselves every day. She volunteered at a local community center, teaching art classes to kids who reminded her of herself, searching for a spark, for belonging. Family life found its own unique rhythm. Her children flourished, emboldened by Sarah's example. They became more independent, curious, and open to the world. On weekends, they explored Central Park, visited art galleries, and, most importantly, supported each other. The scars remained, but with openness and communication, healing became part of their story. There were silly traditions born in their new apartment. Movie marathons on stormy nights, Saturday pancakes with wild toppings, secret ingredient cooking challenges that filled the kitchen with laughter. Looking back, Sarah saw the woman she was before, the self-effacing, reliable homemaker who'd subsumed her dreams for her family. With deep compassion, she didn't regret that chapter.
Good luck.
But she didn't want to return to it either. She knew now that her capacity for love, for endurance, had not been weaknesses. They were the very core of her resilience. Perhaps the most profound change was the sense of agency that grew in her heart. She no longer feared loneliness or the judgment of others. She celebrated her ability to choose, to say no to what hurt her, to say yes to adventure and learning, to keep growing alongside her children. She forgave, but didn't forget. She let go, but honored her scars as proof of her journey. The future, for the first time in a long time, felt wide open rather than fixed on someone else's expectations. Whether it was advancing in her career, traveling abroad with her kids, or finding new ways to give back to her community, Sarah knew she was capable and free. If love came again, she would welcome it. If not, she was already whole. On the 3rd anniversary of their move to New York, Sarah and her children sat on their apartment's small balcony, watching fireworks shimmer above the skyline. Her son leaned on her shoulder. Her daughter, taller now, sketched the city lights with charcoal on a sketchbook page. Sarah inhaled the soft night air, full of possibility, gratitude, and pride. She had not only rebuilt, but reinvented her life. "We made it, Mom," her daughter whispered, never looking up from her drawing. Sarah smiled. "We did, and this is just the beginning." And so it was, a story she authored anew, every day, bright with hope, colored by grace, and lit from within by the fierce, quiet light of a woman who refused to let heartbreak have the final word.